Firing's tricky.
I think that the goal is that when you onboard somebody and you've really conveyed the vision and you've really conveyed the core values and you give them the time of day and you slowly hire somebody because they feel like a fit, not just because of what their skill sets are, but because of where their passion is, where their drive is, that they're going to show up and be 100%. You hope to not be in a situation of firing. We don't ever want to be in a situation of firing when we are. And thankfully, it actually hasn't happened very often, like a true firing.
I've been fired before by my wife.
I've been, what?
You fired me before.
That doesn't count.
Well, but you've done it.
I mean, I fire you at something every day. So, but that's not what truly rocking someone's world by firing them. It should never, ever, ever, ever get to a point that person didn't see it coming. Because if you've truly done a great job of communicating with them and not expecting them to be perfect at what they do based on what their resume says, because you are going to have to mold them into the right result for your company anyway. If you're directing them and you're giving them feedback and you're helping them learn and you're helping them stay on task and you're letting them know when they screw up, and you keep sitting them down and touching base and saying, like, how's it going? Like, this is an area for you to improve. This is the same area for you to improve. And you keep saying that and you have those moments. There should never be a point where you're firing somebody and they didn't see it coming, unless, you know, they wild out at some point and you just zero tolerance policy.
We had this conversation somewhat recently where we were trying to figure out someone on the teams, were they invested in the mission and vision, or was it like just a job and a paycheck? Here's the thing. There's two things. Number one, if someone's hired for a specific task, right, a job, and they're doing it, but they're not a cultural fit, like, you have to find a way to work with them, because you can't just be like, you're done. That's it. Like, I don't like you. I don't believe in that. You know, there's times where I've walked into situations where, like, I want to be like Ari Gold that day. I want to walk in and be like, get the out, right? Like, there's times where I want to do that, but then I walk into a conversation and I'm just like, okay, well, like, how can I, because I understand inherently that that's not really the way you can do things.
Also because it's your fault.
It is 100% my fault.
If you've got somebody that's like,
absolutely,
unless they played a totally different person in their interview and their onboarding and for a number of, unless they were a completely different person, it's your fault if they're not.
Well, and I've started to realize that
reality,
the interview process, the resumes, those things, they just don't matter. They really don't. Like, they just don't matter the way I say we as a society used to, you know, think about them. You know, in the 50s, you could walk into a store and be like, here's my resume, or I'm saying the 50s, whenever. Here's my resume.
Remember the 50s, guys?
Ha, ha, ha. But, you know, like, whatever, my parents or my family, they're like, oh yeah, just walk into a place and hand them your resume and like tell them you want a job. And it's like, yeah, that's not how it works anymore. No one even looks at paper resumes
Although if
anymore,
somebody
right?
did that today, that would be impressive.
It would be impressive, but because it's not normal, right?
No.
But that's not the norm. You can't walk into, you know, Goldman Sachs and be like, I want to work here as a financial advisor, whatever. Like, no one, they're not going to listen.
No, and people have been leaning on their resumes and their education for far too long. I think we've finally seen the point where it's not all.
It's not. You know, people have written, and listen, we've gone through this. We've interviewed lots of people for different roles, and you see things on resumes now that, you know, when it's kind of like, you know, you might be able to pass and say that you're a TikTok expert if you're going to work at some mom and pop down the street that's got, like, you know, grandma and grandpa running the store. They might be like, oh,
that would
man,
be really interesting.
but like, there's a difference between being an expert in something and, like, yeah, I use it and I watch some TikToks. Right? Like, that's an example. And that's a real example that I've dealt with in situation. So you have to understand also, like, what role are you asking this person to fill, and how do you want them to accomplish that? But the mistake I've made in the past, and I still make, I mean, it's not necessarily, like you said, if someone's not fitting or not working, it's probably not their fault. Especially if they're young and they're new to the work world altogether. It's probably not their fault, because we probably, and I keep saying probably because there are situations where it may not be your fault. But most of the time, it's because we haven't given them the tools to succeed.
Yeah.
And that's where it's most important. And when you realize that you are in charge of giving people the tools to succeed, you change your whole outlook of how you hire and then how you fire, right?